In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Daily Memphian Tigers podcast. I am Greg Gaston, along with Tim Buckley, the Daily Memphian deputy sports editor and senior writer, and Parth Upadhyaya, the Tigers basketball beat writer. Once again, we are coming to you from different locations, the three of us and our terrific producer, Natalie Van Gundy. So actually 4 different locations. We certainly hope you will enjoy it. And I know that a lot of people have been listening to the podcast, and we appreciate that. The Tigers with one of the craziest games that you'll ever witness on Sunday as they rallied to beat UAB on senior day, 106-87, trailing by 22 points in the first half, trailing by 15 at halftime. Sort of a microcosm of what we've seen from this team this year, the ups and downs, the roller coaster type antics from this team here in the 23-24 season. And now the Tigers get set for their final regular season game. That'll be Saturday, 11 a.m. in Boca Raton as they'll take on Florida Atlantic, the team they knocked off just a short time ago, beating FAU 78-74 back on Sunday, February 25th. So, gentlemen, first of all, thank you as always. And my gosh, I can't recall seeing something like that. I've seen a lot of comebacks, Tim. I've seen a lot of teams trailing by even more than 22 points. But the turnaround, as quick as it happened, have you ever seen anything, whether it be a live game or on television, in your career?
You know, and I knew you were going to ask me this, and I've been thinking about it. Now, I don't even remember. Who'd they play on Sunday? No, seriously. I've seen UAB. I've seen literally thousands of games. So have I seen this crazy? Yeah. Have I seen that circumstance in that short a time? No. The beautiful thing about it, just from literally from a journalism perspective, and luckily I'm not the one having to deal with that necessarily these days because I'm writing more columns and features and whatnot, but pity the poor beat writers like old Parth, who, when something like that happens, good on him that it happened at the end of the first half and not late in the second half, because you have an entire lead going on your story. You have your running copy going so you can get something up right away, and all of a sudden things change in the blink of an eye. And when you're sitting there trying to bang it out before they either start doing the post-game interviews or whatever, it's not a pleasant feeling. I've experienced that a number of times, especially on back in the old print days when I was working at actual newspapers, and you had actual real deadlines, and the guys at the press are waiting literally to go home for the night. So because they're not going to start the press until they get your story, and you're covering some game in a weird time zone, and it's a playoff game, and they're holding for you. That's pressure. I mean, coming back from 22 in the first half, heck, there's probably more pressure banging out a lead on a comeback like this than there actually is making the comeback.
That's absurd. Wow. Man, can't believe you went there. That's crazy.
Parth, how about you? As far as the comebacks, you haven't been around as long as Tim has. I'm not saying Tim's ancient, but he was around for the Coliseum when it first opened up in Rome. So what about this game and this craziness?
Man, I don't think I've seen anything quite like it. And Greg, you and I were talking, obviously, before we started recording, comebacks have happened. Obviously, in the NBA, it's more common for teams to be down 20-25 and rally all the way back and win. But even in the NBA, you don't see, a 3-minute, 2-minute span of game time, a game flipping that short of a duration. Even in the NBA, where they're, shooting a bunch of 3-pointers and getting up and down the court. It's rare there too. So no, I don't think I've seen anything quite like that, given how quickly it happened and given the margin, the size of the hole that they came back from.
And you, of course, have been around a Tigers team that had the great comeback in the second half at Wichita State, lost a 20-point lead against South Florida, had the good second half against Villanova after the terrible first half. So they have been a team that has changed from game to game and from half to half, quite frankly, right?
Yeah, it's been absurd. Now that you kind of lay it all out, I was thinking about this after I filed my story the other night on Sunday. I'm like, man, this is just kind of par for the course, right? Like it's never a dull moment. Obviously, there's off the court stuff that we've covered throughout the season, but even on the court, just how quickly things can change and how crazy and wonky and just wacky games we've seen this season. It's more than I can even count off the top of my head.
Tim, did you sense late in that first half when the Tigers went on that little 7-0 run, which ended up turning into a 20-0 run over when you bridge the first half, the end of the first half, and the start of the second half? Quinterly hits that 3 at the buzzer. Did you sense the momentum changing? Did you feel, okay, strap in, Tigers are going to come back and play differently in the second half? Or did you just think, okay, they made a few buckets, UAB has dominated, and this is going to be tough to win?
The way how Quinterly hit that shot, the timing of it, there was a buzz at that moment where you almost kind of felt like, really? Could they? Possibly? That was kind of the sense. You never know for sure with this team. Heck, you don't know what this team is going to do like at any moment.
Right.
But yeah, there was a little sense of that. And just to go back to your earlier question, since I am a reporter, I've done a little reporting. Not that I necessarily remember it, but after quick Googling, apparently I watched in, what was the year? In 2006, I watched the Utah Jazz in Atlanta come back from 21 down in the fourth quarter. They were down 95-74 and ended up winning 112-106. I apparently also watched them come back from 25 down in Portland in 2010, which I remember even less than that other game. So my point is, man, it ranks right up there. That is crazy.
Yeah, we've seen great comebacks, and in the NBA especially, teams go on runs. We always talk about going on runs. It doesn't happen all the time in a college basketball game. It happens, it seems like, almost nightly in the NBA. So again, for the Tigers to do what they did in such a short period of time, Parth, how many people have talked to you, texted you, called you, emailed you, and said, you know what, at halftime, I gave up on the Tigers. I left. I come back just to check out the score, and they're up by 10 or 15 points. I'm sure you got a lot of that.
Yeah, a handful, certainly, whether it's like Twitter DMs or mentions or other social media, just people were doing crazy things to try to, reverse jinx the game or whatever you want to call it, switch seats, leave the room, change T-shirts. Like people were trying all kinds of things, and, good on them because they stayed with it and worked. But there were people who shut off the television. Yeah, certainly.
Is it as simple, guys, and I'll start with you, Tim, as the Tigers at halftime got together, talked a little bit. It didn't seem like there was a come to Jesus meeting, if you will, or any type of win-win for the Gipper. But it seemed like it was, in fact, from what the guy said after the game, well, we played harder. There was more energy. There was more urgency. Was it as simple as that, Tim? Let me start with you.
That was Javon Quinterly and David Jones largely, and Daquan Tomlin too, just taking a team on its back and saying, we're going to go get this done. It wasn't necessarily UAB caving, although Andy Kennedy going ballistic and getting tossed certainly didn't help because that was right in the middle of all of that. But it wasn't so much what UAB didn't do as it was what those three guys plus Jourdain did, and Nicholas Jourdain, who is probably as big a part of all that, frankly, as Jones and Quinterly and Tomlin. And it was Penny Hardaway finally having the, how shall we say, common sense to look out there and say, those guys are getting it done. I'm actually going to stick with them. I mean, that was probably as big a difference as anything that the individual players did. And Parth wrote about it.
Yep. Yeah, Parth, about the adjustments. Talk about that.
Yeah, Penny talked about it last night on his radio show. He had a funny little anecdote of the guys getting tired, David Jones and Javon Quinterly, like midway through the second half, and they're so used to being subbed in and out sporadically, almost, every few minutes. So they're looking over at Penny, trying to, get his attention and say, "Hey, we're tired. Get us out of the game." And Penny said he ignored them. He just straight up ignored them, acted like he didn't see them. So he wanted to obviously play those guys heavy minutes, and he didn't sub anybody until the 8-11 mark of the second half. And we just don't see him play, his starters for 12 minutes, 13 minutes into a half. Like I don't think I've ever seen that in my, almost 2 seasons now on the beat.
Nor should they have. I mean,
Right.
They were playing terrifically. You're in the middle of this incredible run. Don't ruin it. Don't spoil it. Even if guys are gassed, if they're still getting it done, ride it as long as it's gonna last. Because when you do that, I used to cover this coach who had this bizarre habit of being in the middle of them having a terrific run, and he calls a timeout, like right when they're at their peak. And it made no sense to courtside observers whatsoever. And it's similar with substitutions. You got a good thing going, ride it.
Absolutely. I was just going to say, you beat me to
Coach
the
was Bob
expression.
Marlin at Louisiana.
I got you.
Okay.
Sorry, Greg,
let it ride. You got to let it ride, right, Parth? I mean, if you're hot, you let it ride. And here's the thing with Penny last year, late in the season, he tightened that rotation. Guys played more minutes. For whatever the reason is, it was, and it has been since he's been at Memphis, tough for him to not play these guys that are part of the team. Even if a team is doing well, he breaks up the lineup. He gives guys quick rests. I don't understand it all the time. I know that's something that's been contentious out there among the fans, but he didn't do it in this particular game. And I would expect that he won't do it the rest of the way for as long as the season continues, because he learned to lean on those stars of his, and they came through.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a Tiger fan, you would hope that these changes that he's made in terms of strategy, in terms of rotations, lineups, whatever, you would hope they stick. They kind of have to, because there's zero room for error, pretty much until you get through or get to, rather, at least that Sunday of the AAC Tournament Championship. And even then, we've talked about it, you could get there and lose that and end up in the NIT. So, yeah, there's zero room for error. He's got to make sure that, these newfound habits are permanent. But he does this every year. Greg, you mentioned it. Like he did it last year, where he's playing at times 11 guys early in the season. And, they had those hiccups against Tulane. They had that hiccup against UCF, teams that they were better than, even with last year's team, which was less talented than this year's team. But then when it gets to about, the calendar flips to February, mid-February sometimes, all of a sudden, like he's making these changes that he knew to make all along. So I just don't understand. But hey, better late than never.
Some coaches, Greg, are just like dead set on, I've got a rotation and I'm sticking to it. And they're very methodical about it. This guy's coming in at that guy, at this time, he's coming in for this one, and it only changes unless there's like bizarre foul circumstances or whatever.
And he's not methodical though. He's not even methodical. Like
it is. It's more random. But like at times, like you're just sitting there going, all right, this is like, it's real nice that everybody gets a trophy. It's real nice that, everybody gets in the game, but like, this is not who's bringing the oranges at halftime league. Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
No, 100%. All right. So aside from that, which strategically worked, and we all agree that was the right move, and it probably should have been implemented a while ago. The other thing he did, which I've been harping on a lot, especially on my radio show, is stop so much with the help defense, in particularly against teams that have the ability to be able to turn double teams and things of that nature into transition baskets. In the first half, that help defense, the communication, which we had seen the last couple of games, was non-existent. It was back to what they had done previously during conference play, early in conference play, when the communication wasn't there and teams were shooting threes wide open at will. They were getting to the hole easily without any much of an obstacle from the Tigers. Second half comes along. You love this expression, Tim, mano a mano. It was play your man. defend your man, play physical against your man. Don't help, communicate, but play your man. That's what he did. So strategically, he played his stars. He played a defense that was straight up, where there was no gimmick, no trap, no trying to cause turnovers, and it worked to perfection. Parth, and he talked about it after the game.
He did. He said that was at halftime where he made that switch, and he told his guys, like you said, to guard their yard. We're not going to switch. We're not going to be super aggressive. We're going to kind of sit back and, just play defense without trying to junk up the game. Man, we saw that. It's confusing again because we saw that against Charlotte, right? Like that approach of just kind of sitting back. It helped in that game because they had three bigs out there with Naquan Tomlin at the three, so you got more length. But we saw it again against FAU without Malcolm Dandridge, with that kind of small ball lineup. Against ECU, we didn't see it, but ECU, let's be real, is a bad enough team where you can do that. You can junk up the game and speed them up and score a bunch of fast break points. They had 34 fast break points against East Carolina. But against teams that are decent to competent on the offensive end, that's not always effective, especially, Greg, like you said, teams that can get out in transition, drill open threes on you, or do both, which is what we saw UAB do. Did you know when Vasquez, I think that's who it was, right? Is that how you say his name?
Yes.
Vasquez?
Yes.
When he hit that three to put UAB up by 22 with minute 25 left in the first half, UAB had missed 3 shots inside the arc, 3 through 18 minutes and 35 seconds of game time. Like, that's absurd. And that's
because they were getting dunks, they were getting layups, they were getting high percent shots, but they also made 8 of their 9 threes in the first half. So they were scoring inside, they were scoring outside, and then in the second half, 1-3, Tim. The defense made the difference in the game, and that was just letting your athletes go up against their athletes. Your athletes, when you're Memphis, should be better, and they prevail.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I want to thank Parth for, even though we're audio only, giving us a visual 3 with his hands as we watch on the Zoom here. Thanks for the graphics, Parth.
Of course.
Look, there's a place for trapping. There's a place for 3/4 court pressure.
Right.
But when they get all helter-skelter like that, look, they're terrible on switches. The closeouts are horrific, and you just end up with guys that, like, especially with no Malcolm Dandridge out there, just totally uncontested at the rim. So at least he made the adjustment. It was the right thing, and it worked. So, you gotta tip your cap to that.
For the first time since 2016, a Tigers team produced 3 players that scored over 20. And David Jones scored over 30. Jones with 32 and 9. Naquan Tomlin, career high 28. Javon Quinterly had 25 points. The big 3, the 3-headed monster, contributed big time to this win. And before we turn our attention to Florida Atlantic and next week's conference tournament, about those individual performances, all 3 of those guys were part of the contingent that were honored before the game because it was senior day. And Tim, I know you wrote about David Jones and his sister, who's in the military in Florida, coming to the game. He was not expecting her, and that was a beautiful moment before they tipped.
Yeah, it was a cool moment. I was actually standing with somebody in the stands, and we were watching it, not really knowing what was going on, and it was like, and then it was like, oh, it's his sister, but we still at that point didn't know the full circumstances. And then when you hear the backstory that he hadn't seen her in more than 2 years, and he had no idea he was going to be there, and he tried to FaceTime her earlier in the day, and she had a fib and say she was working. She couldn't talk to him, so she wouldn't give it away that she was in town. Yeah, that was an awesome moment, and I think it was an inspired performance in part because of that. I mean, David Jones just kind of does that a lot anyway. He's the kind of guy who can take a game over. He's the kind of guy who, as we've all discussed, likes to have the ball in his hands. I got a laugh when he picked up his first technical and thought, no, kid, don't get tossed out when your sister came all this way on two technicals. At least played the game for her, and he did. And it made a huge difference. And I gotta say, as somebody who's kind of kept close tabs on what David Jones has done all season and how that's impacted the team, he lately, I think he's bought into the whole "it can't be all him" concept, and I think that's a huge part of why they're on the 4-game streak that they are. I don't know who got through to him, if it was Penny Hardaway, if it was Javon Quinterly, if it was somebody else, if it was David Jones just figuring it out himself. But I think that's just a big part of what they're doing on the streak and what they could be doing going forward. And this, just as a total aside, for as hard as you can be, on watching some of the things that these guys have done all season, and at times the selfishness or they're not getting back on defense and the getting frustrated with each other or whatever, when you see a moment like you did pre-game, and then you hear both him and the sister talking about it and what it means to them post-game, it humanizes them a little bit. It's not an excuse for not getting back on D when you need to, but it helps that it humanizes it. That's part, I think, why we all love sports.
Well, by the way, was he asked by anybody after the game whether or not he played his final game at FedEx Forum as a Tiger?
He was not, but Dave Voloshin in the post-game radio asked him, and David Jones gave a David Jones answer and kind of laughed and said, "We'll see," or something along those lines. So no, nobody asked him in the I guess the post-game media setting, but he was asked by Wolo.
We also had the interesting scenario in the senior day moments before tip-off where Naquan Tomlin, who of course joined the team halfway through the season, and for those who were saying, "Man, what is it? Since they got Naquan Tomlin, they can't win basketball games." Well, you see right now how impactful Naquan Tomlin is, and that they're winning basketball games. But he was brought out because I guess he didn't have any family that was there, by DeAndre Williams, of all people.
Awesome.
That moment was pretty cool, I'm sure, for the fan base, right?
It was cool. And that's something that, next time we speak to Naquan, I want to ask him, have him and Dre always been close? Did they know each other prior to, Naquan getting to Memphis? I don't know. I do know DeAndre's been around this Tigers team since, I believe, early December. And had spoken to them, I think, in the offseason at some point. So he's been close to the guys, but I know Naquan, somebody who got here later. I think, with the jokes of them being the same person, or playing similarly, right, or whatever it may be, which they do play a similar style, kind of, with the energy and playing above the rim and all that kind of stuff. I think they're just kind of playing along with it, and that's what that was.
Greg, if I might share a little anecdote, Tomlin had a really good game a few back at home, and he was up there doing post-game interviews with David Jones in the media room, and Jones, or actually Tomlin, got asked about kind of having a similar, I don't know, playing with similar panache as Williams did, and just kind of bringing it, getting everybody excited, and he was kind of in the process of answering all that. And David Jones, and it cracks me up because David Jones doesn't realize that when there's 6 recorders right in front of him, you hear the stuff that he whispers to the guy sitting next to him. David Jones just drops a little, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's basically what he said. "Oh yeah, you play like him and you look like him too." And then I saw the two of them standing out there at senior day, and I'm going,
By the way, David Jones, if he was on Saturday Night Live, he'd be the guy that breaks. Jimmy, I don't know if Parth, you watch Saturday Night Live, and Tim, if you watched it, but for years, Jimmy Fallon, of course, has the late night talk show. They always called him the worst as far as breaking, meaning laughing during a skit because it was live. David Jones notoriously laughs up there on the podium, especially when guys are trying to answer questions. I don't know if it's a nervous thing that he laughs or he thinks it's all funny, but boy, he is a guy who is loving life. And again, he was one of the seniors that was honored.
He laughs before
you guys
the
have seen
punchline.
the
It's awesome.
It is awesome. It is awesome. I was saying, I don't know if you guys have seen the thing that's going around Twitter now. A lot of Tigers fans have screenshotted David Jones's facial expression during the press conference from the last game and are using it as their profile pictures. And tweeting out hashtag God got us, which is obviously Penny tweets that out or posts that on Instagram with a lot of his posts there. So kind of like the Ja Morant movement that we saw in the playoffs with the Grizzlies last year.
Yeah, another guy who, if he does not come back, and, I would think right now he's got to be thinking NBA, but who knows? If he doesn't come back, another successful, impactful, one and done Tiger. Think about it, just in recent years with Kendrick Davis. And then you go back, of course, to one of the biggest names in Derrick Rose. These one and doners, and there's probably going to be a lot more in the future, the way Penny puts together a team and in this world that we live in of the transfer portal. But yeah, David Jones, incredible. 5 seniors honored before the game. And then Jaquan Walton and Malcolm Dandridge, who last year I believe was honored as well. I'm a little confused with that, but they were honored privately. But as far as Malco is concerned, as we now turn our attention to this Florida Atlantic game, I still have not heard a peep from the university. I had Jeff Crane, their deputy AD, on my radio show this morning, which is we're taping here on Tuesday, and he said the investigation continues. Parth, I'll start with you. Are you guys surprised that it's taking this long, or did you expect this thing to go for a while as far as the investigation is concerned?
No, I'm not surprised. This is a serious matter, right? Like, obviously we don't know what he's done per se, but just it being an academic related thing is serious. They want to, dot their I's, cross their T's, whatever, to make sure that this doesn't come back to bite them in the butt later, through the NCAA or through other channels. So no, I'm not surprised. Usually when these things happen, and I hate to say it, the player this late in the season does not normally come back. I haven't seen a situation where, for this kind of reason or another, in late February, a player is sidelined due to this, and then all of a sudden comes back. It's just not likely.
Tim?
Well, I would not expect him to at this point. I'll reiterate what I said last time. Even though they apparently have issues when he's on the floor in certain combinations and whatever bickering might have gone on preseason, I'd still rather have him than not have him. I think they've proven that they can figure out how to win without him. But you'd rather have that in your arsenal than not.
I am with you 100%. I mean, he's 6'9", nearly 6'10", 260. That is a strong physical presence. And as you said, they have figured out a way to win without him. And that's, of course, their star stepping up. And they're going to have to do it again this Saturday in Boca Raton. As I mentioned earlier, the Tigers have a win over Florida Atlantic this year, 78-74. Little revenge for what happened last year in the NCAA tournament. But now Florida Atlantic at home, they're going to look at it as one of those games as well. Not only momentum for the conference tournament, but to extract a little revenge at the hands of Memphis. And we know in that game, Vlad Golden, their big guy, Parth, was 9 for 9 from the field. I would imagine there's going to be a lot more of that going inside, trying to get Tomlin, trying to get Jourdain and other guys who may chip in at the big positions for Memphis to get them into foul trouble. It is going to be a huge challenge, and we know the importance of this game on Saturday.
No, 1,000%. I mean, if he went for 24 and 9 for 9 from the floor, I think those are the stats, if not close. Here in Memphis, in that environment in Boca Raton, he's going to be able to do some damage. And Greg, you're right. Memphis is down to essentially 2 bigs. Jordan Brown is playing with a hurt back. Obviously, he looks hobbled, does not look great, can at times barely get up and down the court, frankly. So yeah, they're gonna attack Tomlin. They're gonna attack Jourdain and hope that one of those 2 guys picks up 2 fouls quickly or 3 fouls before halftime, whatever it may be, to play one of those guys off the floor and get big Vlad Golden even easier looks.
I would, and there comes why you'd want to have Malcolm Dandridge back, just
right.
That big body banging on him. Although Tomlin and Jourdain especially did a pretty good job keeping him off the block, because even though he was 9-9, as we talked about last week, that could have been way worse. And you mentioned Jordan Brown and his bad back. Look, if I'm them, no matter how bad your back is, I'd go and just toast 5 fouls from Jordan Brown on him right away. And I'd probably send Joe Cooper out, and while Jordan Brown's fouling him up top, I'd have Joe Cooper kind of biting on his ankle and pick up a couple fouls down there. Do anything it takes to take that guy. Yeah, just put a little Jeff Van Gundy on him and work the ankle. I mean, really, like you gotta take him out of it because you're probably not going to get away with another 9 for 9 performance from that guy and walk out of there with the win, which you need if you're really going to put yourself back in this bubble conversation.
It's a little shoebox arena, seats about 2,500, so it's going to be a far cry from the 13,000 that was in Memphis for that first meeting, but they're going to be rabid fans, and this is a good team. Memphis had a great game plan for that first contest. What's it going to take, Parth? What are they going to have to do to win this one, and will it be any different from what they had to do the first time around?
I think it's the same formula, right? Like don't overextend on defense. Don't do all the trapping and switching and stuff because Florida Atlantic is a team that will definitely burn you, especially from the 3-point line. We've seen that, throughout the season when they've played other teams. So I think that part of it's similar. At a certain point, I feel like just as they did in the first matchup, you've got to let Vlad try to beat you. Like, he's going to do his damage anyway. Here's the ball. Try to beat us by yourself. It's just not going to happen. But I think the main goal would be to take away, as they did last time, John L. Davis and Elijah Martin.
Tim?
I don't know. I respect Golden's game. I mean,
I do too. That's one person.
Yeah, it is. But if you ask that guy to beat you, he could. He didn't last time, despite being 9 of 9, but he could. So I got a ton of respect for his game, and he's somebody who's good, as we've also already talked about last week. It's just really getting under your skin. So they did a real good job of not allowing that to happen last time, and they got to make sure they do it again because, again, going back to the bubble thing, maybe they do have it back in them now.
I'll be surprised if he doesn't have either more shot attempts or more assists, passing out of not really double teams, but passing out of the paint to an open three. But I think they're going to try to dump it inside and try to get the Tigers in foul trouble. Okay, so we know that this game is huge. It was us talking about it last week. Even the week prior, we started to forecast about the conference tournament, which will be next week at Dickies Arena in Fort Worth, and that it was a huge mountain to climb for Memphis to get a top 4 and the double bye. Well, now going into this final week, they have a chance. They still need some help, but less help than they needed, as we talked about it last week, because they've gotten some help. Parth, give us the scenario. Obviously, Memphis has to win at Florida Atlantic, but what else has to happen? What are the scenarios for the Tigers to earn a top 4 seed and a double bye in the conference tournament?
All right, I'm going to try my best with this because I've mapped this out, as you can imagine, several times after each of these past 3 games, and it's changed daily, pretty much, even when the Tigers aren't.
Kim's going to grade you, so be careful.
Oh, man, here we go. All right, so Memphis can either, and this is crazy to even think about, if a lot of stuff goes right, which is improbable, obviously, Memphis could rise to second, then get a second seed. If a lot of stuff goes bad, which is also unlikely, Memphis could be as low as 8. So there's like a 6-spot variance between best case and worst case scenario. And that's because second place team right now is FAU at 12-4. Well, they got to play North Texas on Wednesday. North Texas is hot right now. It's not likely that, they pull it off, North Texas against FAU. But if if FAU loses that game and they lose again, all of a sudden Memphis has the tiebreaker with FAU, right? Because they would have been swept and Memphis is be in second in that case. Then you've got Charlotte, 11-5. They play Rice at home in East Carolina on the road this weekend. So you're hoping for a loss there because just like FAU, you'd have the tiebreaker with Charlotte. They only played Charlotte once, and Memphis did beat Charlotte. UAB is half game behind, and SMU is a half game behind. So as long as SMU and UAB lose one of their 2, then you're safe on that end. And if that were to happen, let's say UAB and SMU lose one of their final 2 games, and Memphis is completely safe in that 4th spot. So that's a lot to digest.
And to add something, UAB and SMU play.
Exactly. So one is already going to be eliminated by default because they play each other in the season finale. That's a good point, Greg. So you're worried about the other, whoever the winner of that game is, which we don't know. It's going to be played on Sunday after the Tigers play FAU on Saturday. But whoever the winner of that game is, you're hoping they would have lost their midweek game, because if that happens, then both will be 11-7. And if the Tigers, they have to win. If they win in Boca, then the Tigers obviously will be 12-6 and completely safe and locked in to that fourth spot.
How do you do, Tim?
Yeah, I got a headache now.
I think you did a great job. We know that next week the Tigers. What's that?
He did do a great job, and I only grade on pass fail, so I'll give him a pass. Although he did not answer the most important question that I'm wondering about, which is, can you actually buy Dickies at Dickies Arena? I mean, because I've never actually worn Dickies. I know you got a whole closet full, Greg, but in that shop, do they?
I don't know. That's a good question. I haven't been down to that arena, so I haven't been to the tournament. I don't know. You were there, right? Parth, last year?
I was there, and I didn't see any jeans in the gift shop there. So no, I guess the answer is no.
Might be a smart thing for them to do. We know that Memphis will, at minimum, play on Thursday, but it may not be until Friday, depending on the outcome of everything this week. Of course, next week with our podcast, we will do a complete preview of the conference tournament. Who knows where Memphis will be, guys, if they can win this game. Right now, they're kind of getting back towards the bubble. I still think the at-large is on the outside looking in. Parth, would you agree, by the way, with that right now still Memphis, even with a win in Boca Raton, would still not be worthy in the eyes of, and we're trying to get into the eyes of the committee members, an at-large? Correct?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I wanted to ask you guys that. But yeah, right now if the season ended right now, suddenly, if something happened and, the NCAA said, hey, we're going to cancel the last 2 games of everybody's season. We're going to advance to the NCAA tournament and cancel the conference tournaments, which wouldn't happen. But if it did, Memphis would not be a part of the 68-team field. I feel strongly about that based on just projections and their computer numbers and just their overall resume right now, with those things that they have with the Rice loss and the USF loss, which is starting to look better day by day because it was a quad 3, but USF obviously is climbing. But beyond that, they're close. They're like right there. And that's surprising because, 2-3 weeks ago, I would have said they were toast. And I did say that at times, on radio and in writing and that kind of thing. But, and I know Tim's going to get bored with the numbers here, but their net is 71. KenPom is 72. Just to give you a point of reference, I know it's not exact, there's no exact science, but just historically, only 8 teams in the net era have made the NCAA tournament with a net ranking of higher than 60. Only 8, So it's not super likely unless they get into that high 50s neighborhood. And with KenPom, Nevada last year, which was at 61, was the highest rated or lowest rated, however you want to do that. The worst rated, let's say worst rated. Nevada at 61 was the worst rated KenPom team to get an at-large bid. So it just kind of shows you that the computer numbers aren't the end-all be-all, right? Because Memphis does have a ton of quality wins. Ton is relative, but they do have quality wins. But if you're going to be in the 70s neighborhood, it's not going to be good for you, quite frankly, going into Selection Sunday. They have chances though. FAU, you beat FAU and you look good there. Okay, cool. Now you're moving up, let's say 3 to 5 spots in both rankings. Now you go to Fort Worth. You win 2 games there. Okay, now you're talking, you're getting really warm there. You're getting to either the low 60s or high 50s in those rankings. And once you're there, I think it's a coin toss.
Tim, I'll ask you the last question on the I'll piggyback off what Parth just said. If they win Saturday and then they go down there and get to the championship game, lose, are they going to get an at-large?
Shocking development here. I have no numbers to back my case. My life is not complete without Parth's numbers. I wake up every morning just, waiting for him to extrapolate pi for me because I know he can do it. Look, they're back. Do they get it or not? I don't know. Are they back in the conversation? They most certainly are. Is that absolutely mind-blowing considering where they were not long ago? It totally is.
I agree with that. I think they're absolutely back in the conversation, but they got to take care of business. It starts this Saturday. Parth will be down at what's that?
I'm saying, sorry, what a bizarre season. It blows my mind.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised if we have another wacky game on Saturday and things that happen. And you've covered it so incredibly well, Parth. Tim, and all the great folks at the Daily Memphian. And it's not over yet, folks. So strap in. Tell a friend about our podcast because they're talking about it each and every week during the Tiger basketball season. Gentlemen, have a good week. Have a safe trip. Parth down to Boca, and we'll talk conference tournament next week.
Sounds
Thanks,
great.
Greg.
Awesome.
Big thanks to Parth, to Tim, and of course, Natalie Van Gundy, our producer. Hey, folks, make sure to check out our other podcasts at the Daily Memphian. We got the Daily Memphian's Food Podcast, Sound Bites. It's terrific. It's hosted by Chris Harrington and Holly Whitfield. The Sidebar with Eric Barnes is about arts, culture, and everything in between. And the Grizzlies Podcast, also hosted by Chris Harrington with Drew Hill. All of our podcasts are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find podcasts. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next time.